you know, Alan have for years. Oh, yeah.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
I hope that Tom.
Well, great. Yeah, my brother's in London, so I may break it up and spend a couple days there too.
Yeah, I was watching these lists.
Yes.
son spent about 2 months in summer program in Barcelona.
Yeah, very cool country.
Nicole, is that the schedule for,
I have mine.
once you go ahead and pass those out, we're gonna do that right out of the chute.
But she's really kind of my niece, and she's from Spain. She's stayed with us for the whole school year. So she's quiet. But I'm gonna go back with her. Madrid, Spain, yeah.
Thanks, Nicole.
And then you guys are good to go whenever.
Test, test. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the staff meeting of November 2nd, Election Day. So I'll hand it over to the county manager, Tom Stoltz.
Thanks, Chairman. Good morning, Commission. Just a cleanup item before we get started on the staff agenda today. Nicole just passed out the schedule for the remainder of the year going into January of commission meetings and staff meetings. You can review that at your leisure. I will point out that we're planning to have no commission meeting on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which is November 24. And we are planning to have no commission meeting on the Wednesday before Christmas, which is 12/22. We'll probably, I've got a question mark by the staff on that week as well. Probably not going to have a staff unless there's something critical that the commission wants to discuss. So we'll probably remove that as well. So you can look at that at your convenience. If you're out of town or if you have plans, please just let me know. We can adjust this as we move through the year. We have 3 items for staff today. One is the first thing we're going to discuss is the situation, the evolving situation regarding testing. With the KDHE announcements in the front page of the paper today and made all the news channels last night. We can talk about that to start the meeting. Then we have a legislative platform we're going to discuss, and Hakeem will lead that discussion. And we have a number of department heads and staff on Zoom and on the phone to join in that discussion. And then if we have time, we've had Aging on standby for the last few weeks to discuss their strategic plan, which the commission wanted back in, actually when we adopted budget. And if, depending on how time goes, Annette is ready to present that today. So let me start off the discussion on what the KDHE has decided on testing. This actually came to my attention last Thursday or Friday, and I heard from community members actually saying that this was going to happen, and confirmed it with staff at Wichita State. I did not receive a notice from KDHE on this issue, nor do I think any of our staff did. Over the weekend, KDHE confirmed through a email that this was true, and essentially what they're saying is that they are, as of November 30th, going to stop funding through state money, through CARES dollars or state funding, the MDL lab testing. So what this does, and this is the reason that so many in the community are concerned, are major employers such as Textron and Spirit, Evergy, et cetera, are concerned with this move. I sat by the school superintendent at the inauguration of the WSU president last Friday, and she's concerned about it because a lot of the school system uses the MDL lab. COVID testing in this area has really been a non-issue for the last several months. Between the MDL's capacity and our increased capacity at the health department, we've not had to send testing out of county at all. And now with this change, this is now going to become an issue again. So I throw that out there for the commission to discuss. I know you all probably have been contacted by constituents as well and Tim is on hand to discuss, what our county capacity is, but quite frankly, without the MDL capacity, and it's not like they're shutting down, it's just that now they have to begin billing people. And this is going to be a financial hardship for some of our businesses who are still struggling in this particular time, and our schools who don't have budget for this type of testing. So it's going to become a problem. And I guess I'm open for discussion of what the commission has heard or what you see as steps forward on this. And I know we've had some contact with Dr. Tomlin and Andy Schlapp at Wichita State, but Chairman, I'll just turn it back to you on discussion at this point.
Okay. Tom, do you have, can they reveal how much monthly billings they do to the state? So we have an idea of the size of this impact for the state not paying?
I had a brief discussion with Andy. I think the answer to that is yes. If they're using public dollars to test, I'm sure that they could disclose that. Andy, I just wanted a ballpark figure on what they were burning through a month so we could get some kind of idea of what this means to the community. And he threw out yesterday, and he qualified it that this is an estimate. We'd want to get with Dr. Tomlin or that staff to get exact numbers.
Right.
But, around $900,000 a month to run this type of testing. And we at the county rely on this too. We are sending samples there on a weekly basis of our employees, so we're like any other employer. This is going to impact us to some degree, and we'll have to address it. So, but
Right.
Chairman, to answer your question, I think we should probably firm up the numbers, get more exact science on that.
Well, I thought I had heard it was about $1 million a month before, so 900,000 close. Then the last one, then there's another question. I also understand that the lab has like up to almost 40 other customers outside Sedgwick County, 40 counties that they
are
serve.
A regional provider, yes.
So they serve quite a bit. So if we were considering any future discussion or ARPA type money, I don't think we can fund anything outside Sedgwick County if they apply through us. We'll see how this turns out. There's a number of questions you're going to have here, Tom. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. So last night, and this question is for you, Mike Papoon. Last night, Commissioner Dennis and I had a conversation about this very topic, and I asked if we could get that information from WSU. He contacted WSU, and they gave an email back to these two commissioners right here, and I was left off, even though I asked for that. Is it inappropriate for us all to have that information? Would that be an open meeting violation, or can we disclose that information now that was shared to a couple of commissioners?
It's not an open meetings violation for like somebody from WSU to copy all the commissioners in on
Okay,
an
so
email.
we can see that.
It's
Okay.
only if you use that email and then start having interactive communications as a result of that between members of the body, so.
But we can have those conversations here, which is the topic of conversation right now.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. So I guess my main questions are, like, if it costs $900,000 a month?
That's what Andy had told me,
Invoice.
yeah. And we were just discussing it because I was just trying to gauge impact to the community.
Okay, and so what are they being reimbursed, I guess, is my question. Or it's just a flat even, that's their cost, the state's reimbursing them for that?
I believe that's correct, yes. Some of this would be better answered by Wichita State, by the lab, but
Okay. So, yeah,
Anything else?
nope, that's it.
Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Commissioner Cruz and I did speak yesterday afternoon, and I called Dr. Tomlin after I spoke with her, and I asked for some response back on exactly what their costs were. Unfortunately, when I got the email back, it was from Andy Schlapp, and
Hey, turn your mic on.
My speaker.
sorry about that. I'll start over. Yesterday afternoon, Commissioner Cruz and I did speak, and as a result of that, I called Dr. Tomlin to find out what it costs and how many tests that they're giving and so forth. And Andy Schlapp then responded, and he sent the email to both Commissioner Meitzner and myself. So at that point in time, I did talk to, or texted back to Commissioner Cruz and let her know that I had an email that had two commissioners on it. I didn't know that I could forward it or not. So Am I able to forward something like that to another commissioner? I don't know that I got the exact answer.
Yeah, you can go ahead and forward that to the other members of the body.
Okay, I was just worried about
No.
it's having some kind of an open meetings violation. Anyway, but what I did learn from that, and I talked to Dr. Tomlin at some length, he's got to keep about $2 million worth of supplies on hand, because we all know that there's a supply chain problem out there. And if he doesn't have all the supplies on hand, if we have a gamma or an epsilon or some other variant of COVID come out, and suddenly he doesn't have the supplies in order to be able to rapidly boost up testing. As far as totals, I'll give you the stats that he provided. Their total MDL test volume between November 20th and November of 20 and October of 21 was 268,259 tests were given. They average about 6,000 a week. And their peak volume at the top was about 12,000 per week. He said 70% of the tests that they run are saliva, and they cost $76.85 each. About 30% of the tests are swabs, and they cost $97.75 each. They do get Medicare reimbursement for COVID testing at $75 each. If they have to result in less than 48 hours, they're $100. Their weekly cost of testing at $6,000 is $500,000 a week is what they're spending. Peak week cost when they move up to 12,000 is just double that at $1 million. With 6 months of testing, the previous average of 6,000 per week equals 26 weeks times 500,000. That's $13 million that it's cost them. So far, they've billed to KDHE $13.6 million, and their expenses to date are $10 million, but that doesn't include the $2.8 million in supplies that they've got on hand. So that's where the total came about. So they're recommending right now that someone needs to set aside $13 million to test till the end of May of 2021 when the schools are out. The MDL will only bill for the exact tests performed. They believe that the pandemic will continue to trend down. The total amount will likely be less than that 13 million, maybe in the $7 million range. But if there's a spike because of a variant, that spike would jack the price up to the 13 million they think that they're going to need. So the other interesting thing when I was talking to Dr. Tomlin is that they now have a test out that can test and tell you if you've got COVID and which variant of COVID that you've got. It can also tell you if you've got SARS, I believe, and also whether or not you've got the flu. So their test has been refined quite a bit. My biggest concern when I called Dr. Tomlin and I saw the email back from Andy Schlapp is what do we do if we lose this opportunity that we've got with the MDL here in Sedgwick County? I know that it takes care of 40 counties, but obviously our main concern is Sedgwick County. We have huge manufacturing bases here, and some of those manufacturers may have to start giving even more testing because of the vaccine mandate. We've got schools that are using that MDL lab. We've got businesses, we've got governments, we've got all kinds of key agencies and businesses that are using that our economy is dependent upon. And so it's not just this cost, it's what's the cost is going to be to the economy, what's the cost going to be to the schools. They don't have the money set aside for them to start funding this. So this is critical. We have to do something. I don't know how we get the attention of the state on this, but I think that this board needs to take some kind of action to notify the state that this is unacceptable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Do we know who at the state level? Do we know who at the state level made the decision
I do not, Commissioner. The notice finally came out from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. I don't know if there's anything past that department that's aware of this.
Well, I'm just trying to understand, I don't, maybe Tim can answer this question, maybe you can, Mr. Manager, but as I read the details on the ARPA funds, there's a huge amount of money in the state that's not been spent. Same as what we have here in the county. So I'm just curious, if this money is directed towards our COVID response, which is what it says specifically, it's all about COVID still. I don't understand why there's any shortfall for testing for COVID. That to me, out of all the things we do, priority-wise, that's top of the list. So there ought to be arguments, whether it be coming from the state, and I can talk about different places at the state where we got to maybe talk about this, maybe some of the powerful legislators, different committees, the President of the Senate, the Health and Human Services chairperson, on it goes. I'd like to find out from their perspective, what's their intention? Are they planning to let this sit, or are they going to address it from the legislative perspective? Because I think out of all the funds they have, and it is a lot of money, I'm trying to add it up. I mean, there's so many different funds. Just the one fund by itself is $1.6 billion that the state's sitting on. And there's huge amounts of money that, again, add this up, is enormous. But it seems to me we ought to be talking to our legislative friends and talking to our agencies to find out what's driving this decision at this point. We're finally getting ahead of some of the negative trends. It's not time to quote Dr. Mintz, not time to take the gas off. It's time to keep it going. So this makes no sense to me. We need to challenge them, I think. If we're unsuccessful, I guess I'd like to ask someone to help us understand, do we have the option of using county ARPA grant funds to address this within our own county for our own testing purposes? And I think it's fine for them to bill insurance. I think that's nothing wrong with that. It's going to slow things down a little bit, but whatever funds are not being covered by insurance payments back to the test lab, if there's a shortfall and people need the county to step up, I think we ought to be committing our own ARPA funds, if we can, to help cover this. And regardless, at the end of the day, however it's handled, if it's handled by us or it's handled by insurance or handled by the state of Kansas, at the end of the day, our testing strategy cannot let up. So now that the news is out there, I would advocate strongly that we engage today and the next few days to find out who at the state level made this decision, and if there's an argument to be made about using ARPA funds for testing, which it seems to me that's almost obvious that should be allowed. I don't care what pot we tap, but the money's out there for this.
There's a couple things on the table. So Commissioner Dennis recommends some type of action by the commission. We can flesh that out. You've indicated the same thing. Regarding the county use of ARPA dollars, I believe the answer to that, we'll check with WIT. I think the answer is yes, but we'll have to go through a competitive process. So we'd have to draft RFP, we'd have to put it out there, there'd have to be bids. And of course, with the cost of the MDL lab, we know it's cost effective. It's local, and it's cheaper than national testing.
And it's
but
dynamic.
we'd still have to go through that exercise, and we got November 2 today, and November 30 is the pulling of funds. MDL put out a piece of information on Friday. They're changing their business process clearly in response to this. So there's some step down process. I know November 15th and November 22nd, there's step down processes. But we'd have to hustle if we want to go. I don't know that we can do it by November 30. Go out with competitive bid, and then come back and allocate our ARPA funding.
I guess I'd like to challenge ourselves then, because again, we need to have some certainty going past that date, and we can't wait until that date to figure out our plan. I mean, everyone involved in this has to know what's going to happen going forward, and I know we all feel a sense of urgency. But if there's a way to do this, even for to have a 1 month plan potentially, or even a 2 month plan to get us into the legislative session, I would be surprised if we can't find a better long-term solution to this. But we might need a couple of months, and so if we have to use, I don't know what, we can talk offline, but I guess I would just say this: I feel a sense of urgency. I don't think we can wait till the end of this month to develop our next step. We have to know, I would say, within a week or so of what we plan to do at the end of the month, and then Again, I know it sounds impossible, but I think we have to challenge ourselves somehow.
In my discussion with Andy on, I talked with him Friday and Monday, just common sense on this would tell you that we should keep the gas on testing, at least till the kids get out of school in May, or at least through first quarter of next year. Now is the worst time. We're going to be in peak flu season. There's still a lot of virus around, even though the numbers are trending better. But part of the reason they're trending better is because people are vigilant with testing and quarantining if they're positive. So, and I think we agreed that this makes sense to at least get the kids out of school. And then if we want to change the business model or we want to pull funding or whatever, it's shocking to me that we only had 30 days. And that's, it's going to be tough to manage through this, but anything's possible, Commissioner, whatever. The commission controls our ARPA funds.
Could we prepare a letter today and have it sent to the governor and to agency leaders and have it maybe reviewed and approved tomorrow at our meeting and get that out tomorrow? I think we ought to be making phone calls, and we ought give the state a chance to reconsider. But I think the reality is if they stick to this, they're going to get a lot of criticism from everyone, and this is not the time to back off. So I'd like to assume that maybe there was a misunderstanding somewhere, that they made a mistake, that this isn't really what they think it is, and someone misunderstood. It just makes no sense. And I would like to ask them to clarify why and who, and if we have to use the legislature to fix this, I think we have to. We're talking about legislative platform today. What a great segue at some point, but this might be the top of our list now. If this is really going to happen, I would tell you that the legislature is not going to stand by and let this happen. I don't think.
Staff would be glad to draft a letter for the commission to vote on.
I would like to see that if that's okay
the will of
with
the
my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Dennis and then Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. Just follow up with Commissioner Howell briefly. I got this from another party, and I have not verified it, but from what I understand is that KDHE is wanting to put together their own laboratory up there, and they're needing the funding that they have in place in order to be able to stand up this other laboratory. So that's what's backing off the funding to continue the MDL here. And I have absolutely no problem with KDHE standing up another laboratory in the state of Kansas. That makes sense. The MDL is only serving 40 counties. We got 105 counties. The concern that I would have with that is that we're going back to the days when we were having to load up a bunch of tests and drive them to Kansas City or to Topeka or someplace else, and that delays everything. We can turn a test around now using the MDL in 4 hours. And now we're talking days if we're starting to have to go back to the old model that we had before. So again, I can't verify that that's the fact that they are standing up a new laboratory, but I did find a pretty reliable source indicated that that's what's happening. So I truly believe that, as recommended by Commissioner Howell, that our next step is to draft a letter signed out by the chairman to the governor, to the legislative leaders in both the House and the Senate, and to the KDHE, and let them know that our concerns here in Sedgwick County and our concerns, I think, are going across other counties also, but we can only speak for Sedgwick County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. Is there a way to see a breakdown from the testing between schools, county, private business? I mean, can we see how that's broken down? Because we're not the only ones who have received ARPA funding, and I do think that we might have more luck getting some other people on board to help fight this and get the state to continue doing as they've been doing. If people know that, if like with schools, for instance, how much they're using monthly, and then if they had to pay for that with their ARPA funds, so it's not just from the county. If we do send a letter, which I'm in full support of, because I do think it's ridiculous that we'd be having this conversation right now. But, I mean, is there a way that we can get our school district superintendents on that letter? Can we get our cities on that letter? Can we really show that we are unified together in this approach to say that this isn't acceptable because we all utilize these services and, this is how we're able to keep our kids in schools? So I would like to see if that's possible to send something or make it more than just the county.
Well,
Pushing
the
back.
first part of your question is, yes, we have a comprehensive listing of all ARPA recipients in the state of Kansas. We have that ready. Secondly, I know that, that major businesses in this community would sign any letter to support this, and I know that the USD 259 superintendent would, because her and I talked about this last Friday. I can't speak for the other superintendents. We've not discussed this at all because it's hitting us in the face new here. But I think that I think that there would be community support on top of this commission letter that we're talking about here today. And I would be glad to have staff reach out to all of these components and ask for their support on that.
Can we set up the Thursday superintendent meeting that we have since canceled since they've kind of figured things out? Can we have that this week so we can just kind of get a consensus on how they're all feeling about this and just let them know what we're doing, so at least they know that we're, working on it as of today. And then, well, do you know if this is going to affect the antigen testing that schools get?
I don't believe it will affect the antigen testing at all.
Okay, just through MDL. Okay, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you. I would like to reiterate Commissioner Lopez's question in regards to the breakdown of testing. Want to make sure that we're able to get that. Is that something that you can provide to all of us?
A breakdown of testing that MDL is providing to
So
components.
she specifically asked for the breakdown of schools, business, how many tests they're doing per industry.
Sure. We can ask Wichita State for that.
Okay.
And you're specifically talking about that breakdown of testing through the MDL.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments, so we've got a little work to do and circling the wagons.
Okay.
All right, next up, Tom.
Now we'll move into the legislative platform discussion, and the way we'll roll this today is I think he's handed out hard copies to you all of kind of the template of what we have for today. And he'll give an overview, but we have staff through some here, some on Zoom, some on phone, if there's specific questions that commissioners want to drill down into on these issues. So we'll start with Hakeem, and then we'll react to any questions that the commission may have.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Hakeem Asher, Communications Director. So this is just a follow-up and kind of the start to our meetings last week with you all. So thank you for sitting down with me. And so we're going to have a series of meetings to talk with you through the legislative platform and the proposed platform, and then hopefully draft a platform to get over to Watkins Public Strategies, who's our contract lobbyist, at the beginning of December, so that first week in December. And then we can kind of get moving on some of our agenda items. Today really is just that start of that conversation. So if you all remember last week, I handed you a thick packet of all of the department's asks. So I've actually shrunk that down with the help of leadership. And so that's one of the, Commissioner Howell, that was the last sheets of paper I gave you, sir. It says propose. I don't know if you were able to pass those down. Yes, sir. And so these are just kind of the condensed versions of what I gave you all last week. The second page is your priority platform items. And so just kind of allowing you all to talk through them. There's some commissioners who still had some thinking to do on some of these. And so I will add those into the notes as we go along today. And then the last page, we thought it would be important to give you last year's platform. And so it's just got all of our priority issues and then supporting issues of importance that you see there. Last year we had five total, and then a number of supporting issues from departments as well. So with that said, Commissioners, we'll go ahead and start on the proposed by department. It says 2022. The first one that we've got there is the Department of Corrections. Glenda's here in the audience to answer questions as well. Their ask is to ask the state to increase community corrections funding by $14.3 million. And this is to get salaries and programming to the level it should be to provide intensive supervision as mandated by the Kansas statute 755291. Next on the list is the Division of Finance. This is a fund creation. We've got Brent Shelton here in the audience as well to answer questions. ability to create funds at the discretion of the county commission without explicit approval by state statute. Ability to also create funds that are non-operating funds and therefore not subject to the annual budget requirement. Next on the list is the Information Technology Services. Mike Elpers, our IT manager. This one kind of piggybacks off of what the Division of Finance is asking for. They're asking for an establishment of an IT infrastructure fund with dedicated funding, which can carry forward from 1 year to the next, Commissioners. Next up is the emergency management. I talked to Julie over the last couple of months, and her really big look right now, she's not asking for anything in particular. However, she is looking at Senate Bill 40, which, as you know, it amended the Kansas Emergency Management Act, and so places restrictions on the governor's power over disaster declarations. Next up, expiration place. Adam is asking for a sales tax exemption for admissions, programs, and or membership. He, in his packet that I gave you last week, he gave a couple examples of the zoo, other organizations that are actually taking advantage of these tax exemptions. The health department has a number of asks as well. They're asking for increased funding for public health post-COVID-19. ComCare has a list here to consider. They're asking that the state fully fund the 988 suicide prevention line. As you know, that will go into place next summer. They're asking to strengthen and enhance the Medicaid safety net. This is the community hospitals. We talked about this last year, and it was also on our legislative platform as one of our priority issues as well. They're asking to address the needs of the uninsured and underinsured, restoring the promise of mental health reform. This will account for the growth in persons served over at ComCare, and they're asking the legislature for $8.2 million for fiscal year 2023. They're also asking to enhance funding for existing community crisis centers, enhancement of Medicaid rates for behavioral health, tuition reimbursement for ComCare social workers, and also asking to accelerate licensing for ComCare workers. CDDO has an ask to develop a comprehensive plan for the elimination of the Hcbs IDD waiver waiting list, assertively addressing the long-standing direct support professional workforce crisis, and to stabilize the current IDD service system, and reinforce support for local expertise. The Sedgwick County Fire Department, Chief Williams, I think, is on Zoom this morning. They are asking, the Kansas Board, of EMS is again proposing, I guess last year they did this as well, licensing and regulation for first responders. The fire district is opposed to this change, which could create more oversight, regulation, and additional workload and fees that will come with this change. And then the district court on the bottom there, commissioners, they're asking to add judge positions to the courts. They're asking for 2 district court judges and 1 magistrate judge, and then the creation of the Veterans Treatment Court and the Mental Health Court. With that, commissioners, I guess, unless Mike has any input, begin the conversation on how we're going to prioritize our legislative issues. I know a couple of commissioners have asked that we shorten. So again, if you look at last year's, we had 5. There's been an ask to maybe shorten some of these. I really like to get an understanding. I also handed you all a list of your platform issues that we've kind of talked through. I'd like to add to that list, and then if we can kind of begin that discussion and ask any questions from our department heads as well.
Okay. Commissioner Dennis?
I appreciate you going over what the different departments have recommended. Some brief questions on some of these. And Glenda's can just nod or tell me if I'm right. This first one is to increase the ISO pay so that it becomes commensurate with the other folks. We quit losing all the folks. Okay, I'm fine with that. Very good. At some point, somebody's going to have to brief me on what the Division of Finance wants, because I don't understand either one of those bullets.
We've got Brent Shelton here, Deputy CFO, Commissioner.
So I don't, do the rest of the commissioners understand bullets 1 and 2 under division? If not, we probably need briefed on it, because I don't know what you're asking.
No, why don't we have Brent explain that? Also, while you're coming up here, Brent, to follow up on Department of Corrections, do we have to put on a legislative platform? Do I read this that they should fund what's already mandated under statute? it says mandated by statute 75, blah, blah, blah. So,
They're actually mandated to provide community corrections in the state, but what we're saying is they're not funding it to be able to do that. So here's the best example that I have. If I have 70 ISOs that I supervise, but they're not getting paid at the wage that they should get paid, and I'm losing them to court services because they get a higher pay, that's not helping us. And it really reduces what we're doing in community corrections as a whole.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Howell, did you have something, or do you want to wait for Brent?
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to, I see Brent's there at the podium.
Right.
We've talked about these bullets too, and these two items here, I think several years now. It comes down to budget planning, and right now the state doesn't allow us to carry over end-of-year balances without having to reappropriate essentially those monies within our budgets. And so this is helping us for very expensive things. Imagine like our election equipment, the $7 million we spent in 2016 for election equipment. If that was to happen, it helps us have a fund that we can set aside and do multi-year funding and planning for our budget, so we don't see these difficult things that are like that. So I know Lindsay and I have talked about this, I think, 3 or 4 years now, and I think this absolutely does belong on here. And unfortunately, it takes legislation to authorize the county the right to do this. It's what she definitely needs to help her plan her budget and help us, if you will, put money back for things that are very expensive. Thank you. Go ahead, Shelton. Brent.
That's correct, Commissioner. And Commissioner Dennis, what we're basically looking for here is in flexibility in the ability to create funds, non-operating type funds or non-levied funds. Currently, the ability or the authority to establish funds is granted through the state legislature or through the state statutes. This gives us the ability to have you authorize to us to establish funds. Carryover balances for multi-year projects is something that would be a benefit. Another one would be that MABCD currently is housed in the general fund. They're not allowed by statute to have their own separate fund, and that would be helpful because of some tracking some expenses there. So it's basically all about flexibility. You would still have the authority to establish the creation of any of those funds.
Okay, so are we asking this as a urban county designation, or are we asking this as a change for the entire state?
Just as an urban county designation.
Okay, so we're going to use the urban county designation to push this forward.
Correct.
Okay, that answers that. Let me go on to the next one then. I'm happy with that answer. Senate Bill 40. With this being on here, we don't know exactly what the outcome of the Supreme Court discussions the other day. I listened to the entire thing, and I don't know if it was worth my time listening to it because I just heard what they had to say. Until the decision comes out, I don't know if this is going to have any applicability. So I don't know, Mr. Paboon, do you have anything on what we ought to do with emergency management?
No, Commissioner, until we get guidance from the Supreme Court, I don't know that we can proceed very, very far along with that, so.
Okay. Well, until we know where we're going with the Supreme Court, I don't know if we ought to have it on our legislative agenda. That's my only point.
And I'll try to get an idea of when the Supreme Court's going to make a decision on that, sir.
Okay. And D, I think, is on line. This is going to reduce this big waiting list that we've got because it takes forever for to get people off the waiting list and start helping them. Is this what the first bullet is for?
For what? What are you talking about?
CDDO.
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 DRE.
The first bullet.
I do believe, I think I heard the question. This is Dee Nicemonger with the CDDO. The development of a comprehensive plan for the elimination of the Hcbs waiting list is our request to push the legislature and the state to convene to study what it would take to reduce the waiting list or eliminate the waiting list. It's not going to be a one and done activity. It's going to be something that needs to be strategic. There are currently 4,574 individuals statewide on the waiting list, and Sedgwick County has 935 of them. The average wait currently is 9.5 years to access Hcbs waiver funding. And so there really needs to be some strong leadership and some strategic steps taken to address this waiting list.
Well, I've been concerned about the waiting list ever since I first heard about it, and it's kind of unacceptable. Is it what we need is a plan, or do we need funding in order to be able to provide the services in a more timely manner?
That is a great question, Commissioner. We need both a comprehensive plan and appropriate funding. As a system, even if there were funds available magically tomorrow, we do not have the local system capacity to serve those 935 people who are currently waiting. So it's a combination of having a strategy and policies in place, but also to have a comprehensive funding strategy to make sure that we have the local capacity to meet those needs.
Okay, so we maybe need to kind of edit this first bullet to talk about not just a comprehensive plan, but the adequate funding in order to start reducing that waiting list.
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Super. Thank you, Dee. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Fire District number 1, Brad is on the line. I understand. I guess I don't have a problem with licensing, so I'm going to have more detail on, if that's protecting the public, why would we object to that?
Good morning, Commissioners. Brad Crisp. I'm on for Chief Williams, who wasn't available today. There's a number of issues with this proposed legislation that we're concerned about. It's not just the permitting, Commissioner Dennis. There's a number of other issues involved. Permitting is one of the issues. It's an unfunded mandate. It would require us to pay for a fee for licensing for the fire district, which we currently do not have to participate in. But that's just one of the issues that we see in this draft, and I'd be happy to cover those for you if you'd like to hear them, or I can just take your individual questions.
Well, like EMS, we've got them; they're certified nationally. I think it's a good idea. I mean, people want to know that our first responders are highly qualified. If you look at our health department, we have them credited. So I guess I just don't understand why we would be worried about this.
I don't know that we're necessarily worried about it, because currently under the EMSS system, we're credentialed under the Office of the Medical Director in Sedgwick County EMS. So the state is trying to peel that out and look at first responder agencies individually as opposed to a system. And I think that would potentially cause problems down the road. There's a number of different requirements for ALS type services, such as Sedgwick County EMS. We're a BLS service. We respond, we don't transport. And so you start getting into issues like inspection of vehicles, inspection of equipment on vehicles, licensing, things that we don't currently have to do individually as the fire district, because it's all taken care of as an entity under the board Sedgwick County EMSS system. And so I don't think that we necessarily have anything to be scared of, quite honestly. We can live up to those rigors. We're just concerned about the additional regulation on an agency, which would cause us additional work, quite honestly. And, with QA, QI, and vehicle inspections, and equipment inspections, and things of that nature that we just simply don't have the personnel to do at this moment.
Okay, well, I don't know, we can work through it there, work with Rusty and the manager and come up with what our position needs to be on this. I just want to make sure that the public feels confident that our fire district number 1 is certified, or whatever term we need, and that they're providing the services that we need. So that's
yes,
the
sir.
reason I brought it up.
If I could just add for that clarification, all of our members currently licensed under KBIMS, Kansas Board of EMS, as EMTs, advanced EMTs, and paramedics. We also credential within the Sedgwick County Office of the Medical Director in those same roles. So we're very well regulated. We're highly regulated. Our members meet all the state and local requirements under protocols. You have a very good fire department, sir, and we're happy to provide those services. This would not enhance that. This is simply more regulation, in our opinion, for the sake of regulation.
Okay, thank you, Brad, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
My last question is on district court, and it's not really a question. I know that Commissioner Cruz and I have been pushing for some time to have a veterans court, so I can get behind this if one of those judges is responsible for establishing a veterans court. Last Friday, we had the opportunity to go to the drug court graduation, and that drug court graduation is something that I never miss because those people are speaking from their heart. We had at least 5 different people brief on what the impact of their lives were as a result of drug court. And the impact on their lives was they're standing in front of us alive, and they weren't going to be if they didn't have drug court. I mean, it's pretty touching to hear their personal stories. I want to make sure that we move forward with the Veterans Court. We've been pushing for it for some time. And so if we get some additional district court judges, I want to make sure that they are dedicated, at least one of those, to a Veterans Court. So that went through the entire list for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a quick question before we get to others. Expiration place. Does it take legislative approval to get a sales tax exemption on a venue that's considered like expiration place?
I would assume if they don't have the authority right now, it's regulated by the Department of Revenue, and typically those tax exemptions go through the tax committees. I don't know if Commissioner Howell has anything to add, but those are, every year you go through a lot of organizations going up before the tax committee wanting to be exempt from taxation.
Okay, apparently the zoo's exempt, but
Yes, it is. I was just going to.
so the process is to go in front of the tax committee because I was just saying if
I don't
we
know
go
that I'm not sure that's actually the process. I know that they could do that, but I read I think Akeem, I believe, provided some information on this. I did read some qualifications for this tax exemption. It has to be an educational facility, and again, the zoo clearly is educational, but so is exploration place. I think that whatever allows the zoo to be tax-free is exactly the same arguments for exploration place. And so if there's a disparity in these two organizations, it comes down to, I think, potentially if, how they're filed with the Secretary of State or the Department of Revenue. But if it does require legislation, I'm fine with it on here. I would like someone to understand exactly why these are different, because I don't think it takes legislation for every organization to get tax exemption. They're qualified by nature of what they do. They fill out applications, they're reviewed by the Department of Revenue. If they're qualified, they're granted that. I've worked with other organizations in Sedgwick County that have gone through this process, and there was no legislation required. It simply was an application. They had to fill out all the right forms, they had to be reviewed by the right agencies, but they were granted that exemption administratively. So if there's something else about this I don't understand, I would love to know why legislation is necessary.
Commissioner Tim Coffin, Deputy County Manager. I don't want to speak on behalf of our legal department, so they'll need to do some research to help us understand. I think the request is to not charge sales tax on their ticketing. And my understanding is that the zoo right now also charges sales tax. Well, I think that's a different status than being a tax exempt organization, which both the zoo and expiration place are. But I think there's a nuance in the tax code about charging sales tax for ticketing.
Okay. That's different than what I thought. When I was briefed earlier, I thought this was something different. So I guess that does change things a little bit. So, okay, so understanding more deeply, I guess we'll find out if it requires legislation. I don't know the answer to that question. But
you had your light on.
I do. I have a few other comments and questions. Right. And I hate to circle back, but, Chief Crisp was on the phone. He mentioned fees, and I'm curious. He said the word unfunded liability, or unfunded mandate, I should say. Those fees, if there is a fee, would that be paid for by the county or by the individuals?
Our interpretation, Commissioner, is that these permitting fees would have to be paid by the fire district. Right now, we don't pay any of those fees to the Kansas Board of EMS.
Can we get
I can't speak completely for EMS, but I do believe they have some permitting fees that they have to pay for.
if that's, so with that information, can we get a fiscal estimate what this actually would cost the county? I think we need to have that information to know how important this is. And second of all, the way it was described, since they're currently certified under KB EMS, is the proposal today to hold the line where we are today, or to increase regulations? And is this opposition to decrease regulations? I'm just trying to understand, are they proposing more regulations above what they currently have? Or are we proposing to do something less than we currently do? I don't understand.
Yeah, Commissioner, our understanding, this proposed language would be to increase regulation for non-transport agencies such as the fire district. So they're asking to increase oversight, increase regulation on fire districts, fire departments who don't do patient transport.
Do we know?
And that's why.
All right. And I would seriously doubt that there's any challenges with our equipment in Sedgwick County. I think we're the best in the state, probably, in my opinion. Maybe there are counties out there that have these problems. I don't know. But maybe the regulation for other counties is necessary, maybe not here. So I guess I'd like to know from their perspective as to why they're proposing this. Is there a problem that needs to be solved? And if so, I think we can withstand any inspections, or we can withstand any audits on our department. I think we would fly through those without problem. It'd also be nice to know, is this like an annual inspection? You know, how much, you talked about we don't have the people. Well, if it's only, who does the inspections? Is it self-inspected, or is we do have somebody from the state come in to do the inspections? I think we need more information regarding what is the actual cost to Sedgwick County in terms of manpower and, of course, on finances to know that. So.
Yes, sir. We'll work to collect that information. I know we don't have vehicle inspections currently by the Kansas Board of EMS, but we do get audited by them annually. In fact, we just withstood an audit 2 weeks ago for our EMS training hours, and we did so successfully. And I agree with you and Commissioner Dennis. We would be able to withstand these additional regulations just because of the system that we're in. Chief Williams and I and others have had conversations, and a lot of this impact would be felt and absorbed by some of those smaller cities and other counties that don't have such a robust system. And we are concerned about some of the smaller cities, even within Sedgwick County. We do have some of those cities, Mount Hope, Clearwater, Cheney, Bentley, Colwich, just to name a few, who may be negatively impacted by these regulations. For example, sir, if these regulations were to come into play and those smaller cities couldn't comply with them, they may elect to not respond to medical emergencies, to not respond to those types of calls for help, and truly become a fire suppression or hazmat response type agency. And we have concerns about that. I'm sure they do as well. I know Sedgwick County has a countywide EMS system, and so Sedgwick County EMS is still going to roll out to those calls, but we're also voicing those concerns for some of those other smaller departments that may not be able to withstand these types of regulations.
Well, I certainly understand the concern. I would say if there's a reason why they can't retain that certification at that level, then that would be concerning. We would want to know that, and hopefully bring them up to that level of standard that they would be able to continue to have that certification and provide that services. But anyway, I certainly see the point. I think we need a lot more information on this. I think that's really the point here. Thank you, Chief Crisp, for that answer.
Yes, sir.
And Chairman, I think that's my only questions on this list. I would just say, again, this is a back page to our platform. There's nothing wrong with this page as it's written, I suppose. I would like to say, though, this obviously, if we take anything off this page and bring it forward as our highest priorities of Sedgwick County, that's a discussion we still have to have, I assume. Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, this is the next step in the process of what we're trying to do. Okay, Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. So Glenda, your number of folks, so when we're advocating for increased wages, so right now I have, this is the 2020 Special Committee on Kansas Mental Health Modernization Reform, okay? So this is like their plan that they've been working on. Is there one of these for the DOC that we could coordinate? Like what are the things that they're working on? Does this come from the DOC? Is that their budget that is allocated towards this?
So the way the budget works for the governor sets, they make a request for their budget, KDOC does, and they get their money from the governor, and then they, KDOC, through a funding formula, passes money out to the counties for these programs. We have been receiving flat funding from the state for 8 years, and Sedgwick County has had flat funding for 14 years. We know the costs keep going up. What that means for our county is less people doing less work. So we have been asking KDOC to increase our budget for quite a few years now. We're at a critical standpoint with community corrections because of last year's funding where they gave, the governor's office gave more money to OJA, which increased their salaries.
Okay. So I wonder so what is the caseload of a current person right now? One of your ISOs?
They're around 40.
Okay, so yesterday I went and toured, I have one of these for you. I went and toured the Diversion Hub in Oklahoma City. We can get this to you afterwards. And this is a place that's designed to help people navigate the criminal justice system. So, and I would guess that that's really kind of what your folks do to help them navigate or to help them stay within the parameters of their, am I right? Kind of,
well,
sort of?
To understand community corrections is to understand that we supervise all those adult and juvenile felons that are adjudicated or convicted of crimes in Sedgwick County. So diversion is usually before.
So but they still have to navigate it in some way. I guess
yes, absolutely.
So are we seeing, if we don't have enough people to help those, are we seeing recidivism rates rise? Like what's the correlation between what it's going to cost us if we don't fund it on the front end?
What I would say is what you need to look at to make your decision process is that crime in Sedgwick County is going up. We know that. They just published the Kansas Crime Index. And, the courts are obviously asking for more judges. The DA is asking for more personnel because we know we have more cases coming. Those cases are going to come to community corrections. And so we have to supervise them. That means higher caseloads. We do intensive supervision, which means we don't just see our clients once a month. We see them often. We UA them often. We visit. We do field visits. That's how we provide safety to our community while we're supervising those clients. If the cases go up and my caseloads go up, that means less programming because I don't have enough people to do the programming that really changes the behavior of the clients and keeps our recidivism rates down.
Okay. Well, I'd like to have a little bit more time with you as a sidebar of this to help figure out how to.
So we lost 8 ISOs recently to court services.
Because they made what? How much more an hour?
A lot more money.
$4 or $5, $6?
Yeah,
$10?
Quite a bit. And that means 320 of our clients got pushed down to our current ISOs. And it will take a year, if not 2 years, to get new ISOs trained to supervise the clients that we're talking about. And in the meantime, we're going to see more cases come through the system.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot to chew for a second. Okay, so I'm supportive of this. I just wonder how we can say it in a way that really hits home. and helps people understand why it's so necessary, because you make a really great case, but it is a complicated subject matter. And so before you leave, can you get some time on my calendar?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
And I would like to bring up the mental health court and the veterans court. We are meeting with the DA and Judge Gehring, and we're having regular meetings to figure out how that will work and how the implementation, and Judge Gehring has some very good ideas about having the specialty courts and his plans for that. So we are in the works of creating those.
Are we working with the city to see how they have implemented, are we kind of coordinating those?
We
mental health
have,
courts?
we have been having some discussions about how that could happen. Mental health court's going to be a bigger tiger than veterans court. It's going to take more days, more people, more staffing, and so we're just trying to figure out how it could work.
Yeah.
And we do know, we have gone and looked at the city mental health court, and they run a great program there, and so we have talked about how maybe we could partner with them as well.
Awesome. Thank you. My next question, so as I briefly just mentioned, I'm done with you, Glenda. Thank you. Yeah. No, I'm finished.
Oh.
I don't have any more questions for you, hopefully. I appreciate you. So it looks like last year, the introduction of HB 2208, they lowered the clinical supervision hours required for clinical level license from 4,000 to 3,000. How is what they already did different than what we're asking for over here with accelerating license for ComCare workers?
Joan's on.
How is that different?
Yeah, Joan should be on Zoom. Joan, can you hear us?
I can. I'm sorry. I had to unmute myself. Where do I have accelerating licensure?
Okay, so my question is, last year they, what is HB 2208? It talks about lowering the number of clinical supervision hours required for a clinical level license. Is this different than what you're asking for here, accelerating license for ComCare workers? I mean, if we have a higher level of degree?
I guess I'm looking at what I submitted, and I don't see that I submitted anything related to accelerating licensure.
It's the last bullet. It's the last bullet. Joan, it's the
last bullet on our, so maybe,
Right.
maybe it's already completed. Do we have like a mental health technician that we're talking about? We've been kind of talking about that. What is the accelerated licensure that they already?
The request is to have the board process applications more quickly.
Okay.
That's the issue at hand right now.
Okay,
We've got employees who may get their master's license, they test, and then the time that it takes to get that license granted so that we can receive payment for the work that they do is pretty lengthy right now. So really it's to prop up the accreditation board
Okay, so processing applications quicker.
for licensing, correct.
It's the Board of Science, Regulatory Sciences Board. It's the licensing body. It's like a board for licensing nursing. It's like the board that licenses physicians. This is the board for licensing clinicians and others.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you guys are walking off a different document than that I submitted, so I'm sorry for the confusion.
That's okay. We'll get it figured out. Okay, so I guess I'll just go up the list. The tuition reimbursement for ComCare social workers. Do we have stats around how many we've lost to a rural community because they were able to have their tuition reimbursed? That's the first part of my question. And then the second part of my question is, because the VA has their psychiatrists added into our urban designation of available psychiatrists, is there a way to partition that out to a VA? Because they serve obviously a certain population of folks. Is there a way to get that separated? I mean, would that be?
Well, I think that's it's really important that that be so. The feds have not done that. They have not separated any designation other than FQHCs, federally qualified health centers, because they're federally recognized as treating the under and uninsured. So our fight has always been CMHCs or community mental health centers have the same population, but we aren't federally recognized yet, so we don't get that exception.
Okay, so 1.2 on this special committee for the state of mental health and modernization reform is access to psychiatry services. It says it's in progress, and so they're talking about exploring a study that can be funded within existing appropriations for the implement of psychiatry services. So I wonder if that can be discussed when they're already discussing it, how we're going to approach getting that separated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we could talk about it at the state level, but it's going to take federal legislation to make that happen under the healthcare shortages program, which funds the reimbursement.
Okay, so when we talk our federal legislation.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll add that to that. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
But back to your question of how many we've lost.
Yes.
I can't give you a definitive answer, but I know probably about 10 in the last couple of years, because they can go to Reno County, they can go to Cowley County, but they can also go to the federally qualified health centers, and we've lost multiple people to those. So I would say it's close to 10.
Okay. So they start with us and then they leave? Or they were already with us, they were getting their education, they got their education, they left? What's the process?
Well, you've hit it all in the head, all of them. So most of them, all of them that were working for us left to go work for one of the centers that pays financial reimbursement for tuition forgiveness. Some we supported through career enhancements as well over the years.
Okay. This workforce plan, I mean, it seems like all of these things that we are asking for is already really in their plan that they're working on.
Correct.
You know, when we talk about how we're going to message this, I'd like to really reference the points on here that, okay, it's 1.2 we're talking about on your task force. So 1.4 is the workforce investment plan. They're talking about a long-term strategy for the behavioral health system. Recruitment, retention, you know, that's obviously part of what we need.
And then just FYI that that Mental Health Modernization Task Force is an interim committee right now again, so they will have revised recommendations. I know the 3 subcommittees are meeting right now and plan to have recommendations for this legislative session.
So this is the last time, or this was produced on September 28th. Do you know when they're meeting?
They're meeting now.
Like today physically?
Oh, no, not today. No, they were, you pulled the minutes from the last meeting. They met last week.
Okay. So the other one I had, let me just collect my thoughts real quick. So when we talk about the 4% increase, I don't see that on here. Where's it at?
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are looking at because it's been revised and submitted with after the recommendations we made.
Okay, so the 4% rate increase that we've been talking about, and Tim is coming to the podium, Joan, just for your awareness. This has been on our legislative platform for the past couple of years. Do you think that the language or the way it's presented is the most appropriate way, or how can we help people understand exactly what we're after? You know, Glenda's over here talking about she needs $14 million to keep up, but this 4% increase, what does that translate to in a dollar sense?
Yeah, for ComCare, that would translate to just under $300,000. It pays for a couple of positions. It's not substantive.
So the 4% increase for behavioral health reimbursement codes translates to $300,000?
For ComCare, it translates to $12 million to the system, behavioral health services across the state, regardless of whether it's a CMHC or a private practitioner or a hospital.
Okay. So then, when we're talking to strengthen and enhance the Medicaid safety net,
That's critical. So that is the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic status. We are one of 6 agencies that are going to pursue that certification come late spring, early summer next year. And what that does is move us from a fee-for-service payment model to a cost-based payment model. So it looks at what is our historical data show in terms of what it takes to deliver what we need to deliver, and goes toward actual costs. So right now, we lose money on every therapy clinic visit we deliver. We lose money on every medication management visit. We make money on case management because the rates are so weird, the way they develop rate systems. This would move us to looking at what it costs to employ our staff, what are our operational costs. So this is really vital. Not only is it vital for payment reform for us, but it's vital because it accelerates what we can deliver to the community over time.
so it looks like in 2.3 of this work group, the reimbursement rate increase and review, it talks about implementing an immediate increase of 10 to 15% for reimbursement rates for behavioral health services. So we're only asking for 4?
Yeah, I didn't know about the modernizations ask until last Friday, which was 10 to 15%. They're not going to get it, but we can aim higher.
We should say they are going to get it, Joan. We're thinking positively here.
Well, I think the reason I'm saying I don't think we're going to see that in the Medicaid rates is because the CMHCs are pushing for the strengthening the Medicaid safety net through certified community behavioral health centers, because our system would go from fee-for-service to that new payment structure. So I think they're going to push some of the money toward making sure that certified community behavioral health clinics can continue to grow.
Okay.
Versus all of it going into Medicaid rate expansion. I think the system will see some funding for sure.
Okay. And then as far as funding the 911 suicide prevention, that's in progress. What is the update on the problem gambling and other addictions fund? It looks like they're going to incrementally increase. Have you heard any of that as far as, when people go, how many people come to you for gambling problems?
It's very small. I can't give you an absolute number, but it's very, very small.
So you see
people with gambling addiction tend not to seek services until it's a really dire situation, and that's a sad statement of truth. I wish people would come earlier, but they typically come to us when they've lost their family, they've lost all their financial resources. So we tend to see them through crisis or through referrals from the hospital system when they've been admitted for suicidal behavior. So the number is very small.
Okay.
I haven't seen the recommendations on gambling.
Yeah, I don't think we've talked about that for a hot minute. Okay. Well, it looks like.
But I do want to, while I do have your attention, I know that Linda and somebody on the commission has spoken about the value of specialty courts. And, we have a district and a municipal drug court, and we have the municipal mental health court. And if we add a veterans court and a district mental health court, I just want to keep in the mix that ComCare is usually a treatment provider, which will mean we'd need additional resources to do that.
When you say additional resources, what exactly, do you have it mapped out? Have you started working on it?
I don't. I haven't been involved in what conversations have been occurring up to now because they're just in the preliminary discussions, but we would have to have the providers to do that.
How many, are you talking, will you be working on how much that would cost and what the resources you would need as far as dollar figure?
I would hope we're brought into those conversations at some point, but I know that right now they're just occurring as preliminary conversations with corrections, and I think the DA or the Judge Gehring we'll be on tap to be part of those conversations. We're just not at this point.
Sure. I think they're just beginning, so that's probably why. Yeah. Okay. There was a state hospital on here. We're talking about, what's the update with whether it's a physical facility or whether we're just incorporating beds that we currently have in our community to fulfill those gaps in whatever way?
Yeah, I think, we just need to keep pushing that they get the bed numbers back up, and that could be a facility, that could be available beds elsewhere. It could be whatever. They just need to increase the capacity for those beds.
So when we talk,
I'm okay with whatever gets fought for with you guys, but in my system, my association, we're just saying we need to get capacity back up because we're having a hard time getting those people into that level of care, and then we have to figure out how to manage that at a community level.
okay, so just real briefly, give it to us as simple as possible, the difference between an actual physical location, which is what's been on our legislative platform for a while as far as a mental health hospital. I see it on here about 5 times, compared to what the state is going, or what the conversation has been around using available beds. Are there available beds that, I guess, do you understand my question?
I do understand your question, and I have to be honest. I do know that people are getting into some of the they call them state institutional alternative beds. The state has contracted with multiple hospitals around the state to secure some options for people in lieu of being put on the wait list at Osawatomie State Hospital for our side of the state. But those beds are also available for the western side of the state that uses Larned State Hospitals, and I know that they have been able to successfully place 126 kids and 50-something adults. The majority of them are not eastern side of the state patients. So ours are sitting in emergency rooms or defaulting back to community services. So I think it's important, so they don't have to guarantee, like say Prairie View would not have to guarantee that they have 8 available beds for state institutional alternatives. It's based on their census on any given day, whether they have additional beds to provide. So, while there is potential for added capacity, there's no guaranteed added capacity where beds or a facility would assure beds are added to the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you guys have any questions about that?
Well, and speaking with Robin Chadwick recently, I think promoting a hospital, a physical hospital with dedicated beds and service, because if they just increase beds, in Via Christi's case, they're full, so it's an endless cycle. So I would lean to their advice, which is saying we get some kind of a regional physical hospital. I don't know how many beds that is, 50 or whatever is to be determined. But anyway,
Sure,
that's my comment.
Yeah, did you have a comment? Okay.
50 is a lot of beds. That demands a lot of people resources. So just keep in mind that we need to balance workforce capacity and bed availability too. So if you're going to fight for one, you have to fight for both, because we have a severe workforce shortage when it comes to mental health professionals in our community right now.
So Joan, in your professional opinion, we talked about a lot of stuff here. If we were able to help you in the best way possible, what would be the top 3 things that you would need to operate at the level that you need to operate?
We need more money directed toward treatment of the under and uninsured. We need to make sure that 988 is funded, because we have a small grant I'm going to be presenting shortly to the commission to add some positions to take those calls, but we need ongoing funding. This only takes me to July of next year. And then we need to keep fighting for the CCBHC status in the state of Kansas.
Okay. Now, I know all these others are very important.
There's so much need in the mental health arena. I mean, it's just a sorely underfunded specialty healthcare. So, I mean, each one of them has value. I can't, but those are the ones that are at least going to sustain and grow some of what we're doing.
Okay, and finally, how would Medicaid expansion help with funding some of these operations?
Yeah, Medicaid expansion is always a hot topic for us, and we support it wherever we can. I mean, there's just people that don't fall in. They make too much to qualify for Medicaid. but they make too little to, I mean, they don't have good insurance through there. It fills a gap. I mean, it's a critical need. It meets the need of people who work hard but don't have good insurance or no insurance, and those that make too much and don't qualify for traditional benefits that really need it.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I do see, Commissioner Howell, underneath your, I do see Medicaid expansion on here. Does that mean you're supporting that?
No, I do not support that. In fact, I would argue that, don't know where that comment came from, but it's not something that came from me, I don't think.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you, Joan. I appreciate your time today.
Commissioner Lopez?
You want to comment?
Yeah, Commissioner, this actually came from our conversation, not saying that you support that, but we had talked about a state level task force. There's a bullet underneath there.
I see that, but to do what?
I don't know what the comment came from, sir. When we talked about it, you said something about a state level task force, and we were going to talk about it.
Okay, I don't have recollection of that part of the conversation. That's okay, though, but nevertheless, maybe there's something to that. I just not quite sure why that's on the sheet there.
You bet.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Lopez?
Thank you. The only question that I had that really hasn't been answered yet is about the health department. It just says increased funding for public health post-COVID-19. What does that mean exactly? How much more would be helpful? Where would that go? I guess, could we just get a little bit more information on the public health
Good
piece?
morning, Commissioners. Adrian Byrne, Health Director. Absolutely. So historically, particularly the last 20 or so years, public health across the country has been underfunded and tends to get attention during public health emergencies like COVID that we're in now, and then H1N1, and an infusion of money will come in, but then post-pandemic, it goes back to where it is. And I think you had the map that shows that, it may not show that we are 37 out of 50, but that we are definitely in one of the lower tiers with the amount of funding that we receive from the federal government. So this is a request for increased funding really for public health in Kansas, not just Sedgwick County. As far as where would it go, and there's not an amount because that would be determined on that higher level, but there's a variety of ways that we could use additional funding, and it would be to increase public health preparedness, readiness, have educators and public health workforce in the community addressing chronic disease, building relationships with the community prior to pandemics, not kind of on the fly. So, outreach and prevention. And prevention is one of those things that has been cut. And to my understanding is the funding source oftentimes that is drawn from during public health crises when additional money needs taken from somewhere. So there's a variety of ways that money could be used to enforce infrastructure and also what we're doing in the community and to train and retain public health staff.
Okay, thank you. If we receive more money for public health, is there a flexibility that it could go into a bucket and then it can be used for X, Y, and Z? Or if we get money, is it going to be, it has to go for one thing or the other like it does in other departments?
That is a great question, because that has been, that is one of the struggles that oftentimes when we get funding, it is for a particular area, and it's not like the old block grants where we would be able to use it in the areas that we need to bolster our own system. So that all depends upon how it comes down. But that's a great.
So should we add on here to not just increase the funding, but also make the funding flexible enough that it can go to where it needs to go and not just in one specific spot?
That would be wonderful.
And then what about with technology and access to data? I know that was one thing that was a struggle last year, was just making sure that we have access to all the correct data in a timely manner. I mean, with our hospital systems and everything else, I know that they compete against each other, but I think we all saw how important getting that data was. And so is there anything that we could add on here, just making it easier to access data? Like if we put more into a preparedness program for health, could that be a part of that?
I think, and one of the areas that would be important to have funding put into, which more on a state level, is the disease management system that KDHE uses. That's part of that slowness at times. The hospital, they have to be willing to provide that information to us like they were to Tom and some of you. So I'm not sure what system we could get for that, but any kind of electronics that get us away from anything antiquated is always preferred.
Okay, could we look into that a little bit, Akeem, on those two, on the flexibility of spending resources and then maybe technology and how we can link in to other organizations?
Absolutely, Commissioner.
And then,
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
I've got a part of your items.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I could, real quick, Commissioner Howell, just to address your concern, from my notes from our conversation when we talked about Medicaid expansion, we had mentioned the Cover Now Act that you had mentioned, and then also look at the idea of county commission passing its own law to review some of those dollars. I'm not sure if that rings a bell. Okay.
No, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
I appreciate the comment. I know you talked to lots of people. I don't know that, and I'm sure you had that conversation. I just don't know that I was part of the conversation. And I don't know what happened there, but anyway, to be clear, I do not support Medicaid expansion. I think there's reasons why that's not good for our state, and I'm going to continue to oppose it. So if anybody wonders about that. So to the extent we understand what that is for our state and see how that provides for our state, I think we certainly need to understand that potentially. But I think we've had this debate now in our state for almost a decade, and I think it's certainly is legislative, and it's extremely political, and it's extremely dividing. And so I know that the regional chamber takes a position, and many other communities take a position. I don't know that we need to take a position. I think we can work with our legislators individually and let our constituents work with them and let them have that debate in Topeka. I don't know that it's a legislative platform that I'm going to, an issue that I would agree to here. I think that debate happens somewhere else is fine, but anyway, I do have some other comments, Mr. Chairman, when it's appropriate for these other platform issues here.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for the chance to speak. I wanted to point out a couple things on the list here that I talked about before. Senate Bill 127 passed last year, and I appreciate the good work of many legislators. Let me highlight Senator Aletha Fascadoy did a tremendous job. In the House side, Representative Nick Hoheisel did a great job, and it was very bipartisan. It passed with, I think, unanimous support, and our Sheriff's Association and our Sheriff Jeff Easter and our DA Mark Bennett and the DA's Association also supported suspended driver's license reform. So Senate Bill 127 did pass, and it's a great thing. It's a step in the right direction. It's not all it needs to be. And with that, I would like to argue that we still have over 100,000 suspended drivers in Sedgwick County. We've not really solved the problem. Part of that is policy choice that some municipalities are continuing to make. But there's a couple of interesting things about this topic. Let me highlight one. There's a thing called a forever look back. Typically, if I understand correctly, if someone gets a speeding ticket, and they can't afford to pay that ticket for some reason, or they don't pay the ticket for some reason. Oftentimes, and many times, that results in a suspended driver's license, and they may not even realize that it was suspended, and they're out there driving around, then they get stopped, and next thing you know, they have a ticket for driving while suspended, and sometimes it's very unintentional. They didn't know that that was the situation. What makes this complicated is, unlike most other things, there is a forever look back on this topic. So if you had a driving while suspended when you were 16 years old, and you have another one when you're 30 and another one when you're 40, again, maybe by accident, it comes with these minimum mandatory sentences, very high fines, and jail time. And I've talked with people just in the last month or so, several people who are spending quite a bit of time in jail and have worked on trying to get themselves back on their feet. But this is such a punitive topic. Most of the people who are driving, most of the people are impacted by this are not bad drivers necessarily. They're doing this. They're having challenges because of primarily things like unpaid fines. That starts the process. Some of them have tens of thousands of fines, dollars worth of fines that have racked up, and they've spent as many as a year or more in jail over this issue. And talked with one. I plan to go to court with him again tomorrow. I went last month, trying to ask for a stay. I've met with 4 members of the city council so far. I plan to meet with the other members across the street. District court, when someone has these types of charges in district court, they have some discretion. The judges have discretion on fines and fees. They can reduce those fines and fees in district court. And our prosecutors can allow them to plead to a lesser charge, which means they can, for example, rather than driving while suspended, they can plead to, say, driving without possession of a driver's license, for example, with a very small fine. And the reason that they do that primarily is because of this lifetime look back. This lifetime look back, because it has such a weighty consequence, many times people don't even realize that they did this. And it comes with mandatory jail sentences, for example, and extremely high levels of fines. Many times they have to lose their job and actually spend time in Sedgwick County Jail, and then they end up becoming, then they become necessary for government to come in and help them out in other ways. And so it's very expensive to taxpayers for this problem. I'm not suggesting we would have mandatory sentences that are less than what's allowed under the law. I would like to give the judges discretion, is the point. Give the judges discretion and the prosecutors discretion to do that. And by the way, Senate Bill 127 actually, I guess, set up the fines and fees part of this, and prosecutors do have the discretion to allow them to plead for lesser charges. The two things that are left in this discussion is whether or not there should be a lifetime look back should have some type of a time frame, like say 10 years, for example. So if they did this when they were 16 years old and they're 30 or 40 years old, they're not going to go back that far to find history of this. It's a bit much. I appreciate Pilar Pedraz on Cake TV has really focused on this issue the last couple of years, but we haven't really solved the problem completely. And this lifetime look back is part of the problem. And second of all, the mandatory minimum sentences, in my opinion, should be reviewed. If you look at any other thing these people might do, for example, let me give you one example. If they have a second conviction of domestic violence battery, it's a minimum sentence of 5 days in jail. But if they get a third driving while suspended for fines, for example, it's minimum 6 months in jail. It doesn't quite make sense to me. So I think there ought to be a review of those minimum sentence guidelines for this charge. I would actually like to see us have a bifurcated charge. One of them that is due to, and let's be clear, if they're getting a driving while suspended, and there are certain things that I think are very concerning that might fall into this category. Let me see if I can find it here. Let me see it here. for example, if they have car accidents, cases where significant crimes are charged, extensive criminal history and other considerations deemed relevant by the prosecuting attorney, this would not qualify. But if it's basically born out of administrative pressure from the courts, I would like to bifurcate that charge and say driving while suspended for those causes should have a different classification, if you will. And that's the type of classification that should be eligible for prosecutors and judges to find ways to help these people back on their feet. We talk about these courts trying to get people back to productive status. If we are very, very punitive, sometimes they can't hold their job, for example, and go make money to pay off their fines and fees because they can't get to work. It doesn't seem very smart to me that that's what we're doing. So around 70% of all the charges, or actually about 70% of the people in this classification are there primarily because of administrative pressures of the court. And so, again, if someone's doing the right things, trying to get back on their feet, I would like to see a court system that recognizes that and we're into the idea of corrections rather than punishment. And I think that's the key here. We talk about criminal justice reform. This is a very important matter for Sedgwick County. I know in the past I've had to argue very hard to keep this on our platform, and we did that last year, and we had some success. I want to say thank you for everyone for helping to get that done. Again, to those legislators that carried the water. I did testify numerous times in Topeka last year, and Governor Kelly came to Sedgwick County. We celebrated the ceremonial bill signing in Sedgwick County. Many of us stood with the governor and celebrated Senate Bill 127. The problem is it didn't really solve all the problems, and so we need to go back to the legislature and try one more thing. So I added it to your list. It's on there very clearly. It talks about there's a forever look back law. I would like to see that shortened to 10 years. I'd like to bifurcate those charges so that it's clear whether these charges are born from administrative pressures of the court versus bad behavior such as reckless driving. And then I'd like to have a review of the minimum sentencing guidelines, giving the courts, the judges, and the prosecutors discretion when someone's trying to do all the right things to get back on their feet. I have an example. A gentleman who's just spent time in prison, got out. He's dealing with a driving while suspended that goes way back to when he was very young. And he has 2 jobs. He's paid off around $30,000 in fines and restitution. And yet he's now contemplating having to lose his job and spend 6 months in incarceration because of the suspended driver's law. And so I'm dealing with that. I had another one call me yesterday, very similar story. He just spent a year in prison. And he's in Sedgwick County Jail today because of the very same thing. Now, there's a couple of other issues on that particular case, but primarily the driving while suspended issue is very, very punitive. And there seems to be not an effort for those folks that are trying to get back on their feet to help them out. So this is primarily an issue that really harms people that don't have financial capabilities, and people who are minority races in our community are especially harmed by this law. So with that, I would like to see this on our list. And by the way, we talked before about a huge number of people driving around without insurance, and I think that ties into this issue. And when people who are driving around without a license and driving around without insurance, if something happens, they may be tempted to flee and elude and possibly cause other accidents and injuries. So there's a huge cost to this. It starts with, in my opinion, a bad policy of our state. So to think this is not a Sedgwick County government concern, I think it's very much a concern. And I'd like to see this on our list. Second thing I pointed out here was Capers 3 reform thing. Capers 3, in my opinion, is a wet blanket. It doesn't help us recruit and retain employees. I would like to give our employees options to not participate in Capers 3, but to participate in Capers 457B plan instead. And anybody who wants to transition from Capers 3 to 457 ought to have that opportunity. To me, that is a very important thing for us to be competitive in the private market, in the private sector. And then the last thing I would talk about was, and this is, I'm so glad you're here, Linda, still. I think 367, Senate Bill 367 that passed in 2016, I think it was very well intentioned, but I think it has the effect of it's actually, in my opinion, keeping youth that would otherwise be charged with crimes. They're not being charged with crimes. They're being handled with these community-based programs, which I think are great, and I support them with passion, but they're also being intermingled, if you will, with children in need of care, youth. And they also get involved in foster, there's also a foster care component to this. When you look at how foster care programs changed since Senate Bill 367 passed, our foster care system is actually has had a direct impact of that law. And I think the problem is we need to maybe go back and make some changes to 367. I've been talking with at least one district court judge who's focused on this issue, and I believe there are opportunities for us to make that better. So with that, this again impacts our youth of Sedgwick County. I think it's very important that we have a system that keeps children in need of care separate from criminal offenders. And right now, the system has got them intermingled, and it's causing an impact on our foster care system. I would like to work with you, Glenda, but I think this is an issue, and we need to go back and redress this because it's a huge problem for Sedgwick County. With that, I think that's all the things I had, but I would point out one other thing, I guess. As I look at our platform last year and our platform this year, I think we need to decide if we want more tax dollars flowing to these things, because we're asking for a lot of spending for Sedgwick County. I know our needs are great, and to the extent that the federal government or the state government is currently taxing us and providing these programs back to Sedgwick County or any other community, we need to compete for those dollars, no question. We need to try to do whatever we can to bring those programs back to Sedgwick County to help our residents and our constituents and our people. I'm not asking the state necessarily to create new spending or or the feds for that matter, new programs that rely on them choosing to tax our citizens more. Because if that's the answer, we don't need them to do that. We can do that on our own. I'll argue, and I've talked to others, our CFO and others in county government. I believe that if you were to follow the dollars, Sedgwick County actually receives less from the state and less from the federal government than we provide in tax dollars to those two organizations, those two governments. So again, I think we're a net loser, if you will, of tax and spend programs. And so if we believe these are the right things for us to do, rather than asking them to increase taxes and give the money back to us along with every other community, we don't have to follow that strategy. We can do this on our own. If we think this is good government and things we need to support from, because we see these needs in our community, I think we have the option of doing this on our own without asking the state or federal government for help. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't ask for those grants. If those grants are out there, let's go for them. But if we're asking them to increase what they do, tax us more and give us some of that money back, that's not the only option. The other option, of course, is to do this with our own money. Our money that we tax from our people and providing services back to our people. We have those options without asking the state and federal government to do this on our behalf. If you believe in small government and you believe in personal responsibility at the lowest levels, we don't need bigger levels of government to do this for us. We can do this on our own. And I would just say that if we believe these are our priorities, again, to the extent there's an intent by the state or federal government to tax and provide funding back to us for these ideas, I think we should absolutely do everything we can to get those dollars to our county. But if that money is not available to us, I don't think we should slow down. I think we should go ahead and decide if it's important to Sedgwick County, let's find a way to do that without the state or federal government. And I think that is something we have to talk about more. All right, thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Lopez. Oh,
Quick
go ahead.
question. Commissioner Howell, did you want to keep stormwater mitigation on your list as well?
Yeah, I thank you for that.
You're welcome, sir.
Stormwater mitigation, again, let's go back to 1980, I think in 1988, Johnson County exercised the option. They allowed their electors to choose whether or not they wanted to fund a stormwater program, and they have a 1/10 sales tax that I think in Johnson County provides about last year was, I believe it was $22 million for Johnson County that they put into infrastructure issues related to stormwater. And they've been doing this since 1988. And so if we want to ask the legislature for a right, again, for Commissioner Dennis said this the other day, let the people vote. I think if we want to give the people the opportunity, all we have to do is connect the dots. Give the people a chance to say they want this type of government or they don't. And I'm fine with either answer. But if we don't ask the legislature for permission to put this back on a ballot, we'll never get that opportunity to ask the people. It's legislative first, and then it goes on a ballot. If the people want Sedgwick County to levy that tax revenue to solve these types of problems in Sedgwick County, the people ought to have a right to clarify that. So it does require legislation initially, and I can tell you that right now we have several studies that are in the billions of dollars of projects that would require they're never going to be funded. Our SMAB board, frankly, their Storm Water Management Advisory Board is never going to get any type of funding if we don't start finding a solution to this problem. And again, if we're not going to do it, that's fine. But I just think it's reasonable to ask the legislature and ask the people if they want us to do this. We have to have this on the platform to ask that question. Thank you.
Commissioner Lopez?
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to just go back to the Medicaid expansion conversation. I would love to see us add that on there because it would help. I mean, we're hearing all these things from ComCare and from our health department. It would help in those areas. If Kansas did it, it could create 23,000 new jobs. It could increase if it expanded from 22 to 25, it would increase our economic output in Kansas by $17 billion. But I also think we really do need to look at the Cover Now Act. I know that's something that you and I did kind of hit on. And it's pretty much just a local version of that. You can do it individually as counties, or you can do it regionally with other counties. It's got the same rules as statewide Medicaid expansion. If a state ends up opting into Medicaid expansion while it's already happened, everybody who's eligible at the local level would just automatically be enrolled at the state level. And I mean, we could get more people covered. I mean, this last year we really saw how hard some communities are hit more than others. And if they had access to health care, maybe that wouldn't have been so bad. So I'm completely in favor for that. When I started here and did my tours with different departments, not only our health department, but ComCare also went on just about how much it would help if we could get that expanded in Kansas. So I would like to look at that, but also looking at the local level Cover Now Act and seeing what, if anything, Sedgwick County can do to get around the state holding that up, and seeing if any other counties would want to join in on that to make it more of a regional approach instead of just one county. Thank you.
Okay, Hakeem, I don't see any other questions. What else do we have here?
That's it, Chairman.
Okay. Tom, thank you, and thank you for the healthy discussion, commissioners. Tom, what else we got?
Well, we were going to discuss aging, but maybe we should defer that to a future meeting and hit that fresh. I'll leave that up to the commission to know.
If it's the will of the commission, how long? This is something, I guess, that's been pending based on the commission asked for this study or this report.
Yes.
We've delayed it a few times, Commissioner Cruz.
I think this conversation is large and will be lengthy, and I don't know that if you guys want to get into it now, that's fine. And maybe it won't be as large as I'm thinking, but I would like to really know, in an action step way, what will be what are the things that we're looking to improve on, because it seems like the information that we're given is a lot of information, but I don't really know what the action steps are in regards to that information and how we're going to move the needle with a strategic plan, because it didn't really make sense to me. I mean, with all due respect, I just really didn't get how we were going to plan, what we were planning to improve. And so that's where my questions are, in regards to, multi-generational disciplines, or how we're moving from seniors to being more active in other parts of the community with all different age groups. So those are really my broad questions. And I would like to do it a different day because I think it's going to be a long discussion, but I'm happy to have it today if you guys want to do that.
Okay. Well, we can, based on your comments, if you want to delay it we can delay it. Maybe if you've got in-depth stuff that you could also work directly to get some of those questions answered as it gets ready for the
Sure.
presentation, so.
I think it's a staff meeting on its own. I think it's a deep enough topic. I think we'll have questions and we'll want clarity.
Okay.
The only other thing I'd want to say on legislative agenda, the plan, I think, now is to take this back and modify this document based on discussion that we had with Commission Day. We shoot that back to electronically. I think the plan is on November 17 to bring that back to the commission meeting to have you formally discuss it in public and perhaps vote on it or defer. I think we are drop dead on a platform probably is December 1, December 8, or later than that. But I just want to give you the heads up that you'll see, we'll put this on the agenda, the open new business agenda for 17 November. So
Okay.
I think that's all we had then, Commissioner.
Okay.
Chairman.
The commission have anything else? I don't see any. We do have a pretty serious meeting tomorrow, so we will call it a day, and we'll see everybody at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you.